He told me I was emotionally draining while I was paying for his therapy. That's how the story ends, or maybe that's where it truly begins. My name is Bonnie Griffith. I'm 29 years old, and for the longest time, I thought love meant rescuing someone from their own darkness. When Tyler first moved into my apartment, he called it his safe place. He'd just come out of a messy breakup, the kind that leaves bruises on your confidence. He said his ex, Melissa, had messed him up emotionally. I believed him. Maybe I wanted to believe him because if he was broken, then I could be the one to fix him. At first, I didn't question the late-night silences or the sudden storms of tears. I just held him when he needed to be held, gave him space when he didn't. I made myself small so he could breathe. When he said therapy was too expensive, I told him not to worry. I'd cover it. It wasn't cheap, but I told myself love was supposed to be an investment. Every Wednesday, I drove him to his sessions and waited in the car, scrolling aimlessly while he found himself. Afterwards, we'd go for dinner. I'd listen while he talked about his progress, how hard he was trying. I'd smile proud of him. He used to text me things like, "You're my calm," or "I don't know what I'd do without you." Those little messages were fuel for my hope, proof that my patience meant something. But over time, his gratitude turned into expectation. Expectation turned into irritation, and irritation into contempt. It started subtly. If I asked about therapy, he'd sigh like I was nagging. If I told him I missed him, he'd laugh it off, saying, "You're too intense sometimes, Bonnie." One night over dinner, I asked gently, "Do you think therapy's helping?" He rolled his eyes. "You don't have to make everything about feelings you know. Can't we just exist for once?" I went quiet. He reached for his wine like nothing had happened, and I forced a smile. I told myself he was tired, that it wasn't about me. But something inside me folded in half that night. A week later, he brought up Melissa again. We were chopping vegetables, casual, almost playful, when he said Melissa and I used to cook together. It was easy. Nothing was ever so heavy. I froze mid-chop. Heavy, I repeated. He shrugged, stirring the sauce. "Yeah, you just overthink everything. You're emotionally draining sometimes. I miss when things were easy." The words felt like glass shattering in my chest. I wanted to tell him about the nights I stayed awake holding him through panic attacks, about how I rearranged my work schedule to drive him to therapy, about the thousands I'd spent just so he could heal, but I didn't say any of it. I just stared at the cutting board. The knife gleamed under the kitchen light, reflecting my face, tired, pale, hollowed by someone else's weight. "I didn't know caring could be exhausting," I said quietly. He laughed, light, dismissive. "That's exactly what I mean. Everything turns into an emotional moment with you." Then he went back to stirring. That sound, the wooden spoon scraping the pot, echoed louder than any argument we could have had. After that, the air in the apartment changed. His work nights got later. He kept his phone face down. The hugs became colder, mechanical. Once I heard him whispering on the balcony, his tone soft, intimate. When he walked back in, startled to see me awake, I asked, "Who was that?" He blinked. "A friend. Work stuff. You don't need to know everything, Bonnie." I smiled politely and said nothing, but his words etched themselves into my memory. You don't need to know everything. That's how people talk when they're hiding something. The next morning, he kissed my cheek like nothing had happened, and I pretended to believe him. But inside, something quiet and dangerous began to shift. The woman who once measured her worth in how well she could love a broken man, Faye, was starting to wonder what she'd lose if she stopped. After that night, the silence between us became its own language. He'd come home late, shoes dragging, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't his. When I asked where he'd been, he'd sigh, the kind of sigh that accused me of asking before I even said a word. "I told you," he'd mumble, loosening his tie. "Work drinks. My therapist said I should socialize more." He made his therapist sound like a shield, someone who granted him permission to do whatever he wanted. I'd nod, pretending to believe him, but my stomach always tightened when I heard the lock click at midnight. One evening, I found one of his receipts on the counter. 2 glasses of wine, 1 entree, 1 dessert. The restaurant name was scrawled at the top, the same place where we used to celebrate anniversaries. When I looked up, he was already watching me. "Why are you going through my things?" he asked. "I wasn't," I said softly. "You left it here." He took it from my hand, tore it in half, and smiled without warmth. "You really need to stop overanalyzing everything, Bonnie. It's exhausting." That word again. Exhausting. I used to think I was his anchor. Now I realized he thought I was his weight. Sometimes I'd catch him staring into space, scrolling on his phone with a faint smirk. When I walked into the room, he'd lock it instantly, as if the light of the screen would betray him. I stopped asking. I stopped confronting. I just watched. Because when love turns into suspicion, you learn that silence tells the truth faster than any confession ever will. Weeks passed like that. He'd come home late, say I'm tired, and collapse on the couch. He no longer told me about therapy or Melissa or anything at all. The man I fell in love with, the one who used to say, "You're my calm," was gone. In his place was a stranger who only spoke in half-truths and accusations. One night, he didn't come home at all. I sat on the couch till dawn, the clock ticking too loudly, my phone face up on the table. He texted at 5:37 a.m. "Stayed at a friend's, don't wait up next time, I need space." That word space used to sound like self-care. Now it sounded like rejection wrapped in therapy jargon. I tried to convince myself he was just lost the way hurt people often are. But the thing about loving someone who's broken is eventually you realize they don't want to be healed, they just want you to bleed with them. He began to twist everything I said. If I asked a question, I was insecure. If I stayed quiet, I was passive-aggressive. If I cried, I was too emotional. If I didn't, I was cold. There was no right way to love him anymore. Every word I spoke felt like stepping barefoot on glass. Then came the night that burned everything down. It was raining hard enough to drown out my thoughts. I walked past the balcony to close the sliding door and froze. His voice. Low, soft, too familiar. "No, she's asleep. Yeah, I miss you too." The words sliced through the rain like thunder. When he turned, I was standing there, arms crossed, expression calm, though my heart was roaring. "Who was that?" I asked quietly. He blinked, startled. Then his voice hardened. "Why are you eavesdropping, God, Bonnie? You're suffocating sometimes." I laughed at the kind of laugh that sounds more like breaking. "Right, because I overheard you missing someone else." He ran a hand through his hair. "You always twist things. You hear what you want." "No," I said softly. "I'm just finally hearing you clearly." That night I didn't cry. I lay awake beside him, listening to the rhythm of his shallow sleep. His phone buzzed once, twice. He didn't stir. The next morning he kissed my forehead, like he hadn't just torn something sacred apart. And as the door closed behind him, I stared at the empty space he left, realizing that love shouldn't feel like surviving someone's moods. He said I was emotionally draining, but maybe he was right, just not in the way he thought, because loving him had drained everything from me. The day everything snapped was a Thursday. I remember because Thursdays were therapy days. He'd left early wearing that same navy shirt I'd ironed for him the night before, the one he always wore when he wanted to look put together. He didn't kiss me goodbye, just said, "Don't wait up." By then, I'd stopped asking where he was going after his sessions. You learn eventually that people who want to be caught will leave a trail. People who don't make sure you look crazy for following it. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was Lena, a mutual friend. She sent a message that started with, "Hey, are you and Tyler okay?" My stomach dropped. Before I could type back, a photo followed. Tyler, sitting across from Melissa at a cafe, leaning in close, smiling in that effortless way I hadn't seen in months. Her hand rested on his arm, his phone face down on the table. The timestamp read 2:47 p.m., the same time he was supposedly in therapy. I stared at the picture for a long time, waiting for the ache to rise, for tears, for rage. But what came instead was silence, cold and strangely liberating. Because deep down I already knew. The light had gone out long before that photo. The picture was just proof. That evening, I drove home in the rain. Every streetlight looked like it was watching me. I walked into our apartment, still smelling of his cologne, and saw his mug on the counter, the one that said, "Progress, not perfection." I picked it up, stared at it for a moment, then placed it gently in the sink. Then I opened my laptop, canceled the automatic payments for his therapy sessions, booked a small rental 2 neighborhoods away, and began packing. Not out of anger, out of clarity. I didn't take everything. Just what I brought into the relationship, my clothes, my books, the wooden jewelry box my mom gave me. He could keep the furniture, the dishes, the safe place he once called ours. Before leaving, I stood in the kitchen one last time. The place felt hollow, stripped of laughter, of late-night whispers, of everything I once thought was love. I took a sticky note and wrote in neat blue ink, "You said I was draining. I hope this feels lighter." I set it beside his keys and walked out without looking back. He didn't notice I was gone until hours later. While I unpacked my last box in the new apartment, my phone lit up one call, then another. Then a message. "What the hell is this, Bonnie? Are you seriously ghosting me? You're being dramatic." Melissa and I were just talking. My therapist said closure is healthy. Please call me. Don't do this. I turned the phone face down and let it buzz. For months, I had waited outside his therapy sessions, believing that healing was something we could share. But I finally understood some people don't want healing, they want an audience. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in nearly a year. No shallow breaths beside me, no anxious whispers of "don't leave," just stillness. When I woke up, the morning light poured across the floor, clean and golden, and I realized something that terrified me at first. Peace can feel lonely at the beginning, but that's only because you've forgotten what quiet really sounds like. For the next few days, my phone was a war zone: calls, voice notes, long paragraphs that swung between anger and apology. "You overreacted. You misunderstood. Melissa means nothing. Please, Bonnie, don't do this." I didn't respond to any of them. I wasn't playing a game. I was done playing his. When he realized I wasn't answering, the tone of his messages changed. "You always do this, you know. You run away when things get hard. I was just trying to figure myself out. You, of all people, should understand that." That last line made me laugh. I did understand. That's why I left. 2 days later, he showed up at my new apartment. I knew he would. People like Tyler don't handle silence well. It forces them to hear their own echoes. He knocked for 5 full minutes before I opened the door. He looked furious and panicked all at once. "So that's it," he snapped. "You just leave? No conversation, no closure." I leaned against the doorframe, calm. "You already had your closure," I said. "You just wanted me to stay and watch you enjoy it." His jaw tightened. "You always twist everything. I didn't cheat on you. Melissa just needed clarity. I was helping her move on." "Right," I said quietly. "How generous of you." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're being cruel. You know I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know," I said, meeting his eyes. "You just didn't care enough not to." The silence that followed was suffocating. For the first time, I watched him struggle for words and find none. He had always been good at deflection, good at making me doubt myself. But now he was talking to someone who had already stopped listening. He took a step back, trying a different tone. "Bonnie, I just need time. We can work through this." I shook my head. "You need therapy, not an audience. I'm done clapping for your pain." Then I closed the door. Not dramatically, not with tears, just firmly, finally. The first week alone felt strange. Not painful exactly, just empty. I kept expecting the sound of keys in the lock, his humming in the shower, the thud of his shoes in the hallway. But all I heard was the hum of my refrigerator and the occasional buzz of my phone. I didn't answer his messages, but I read them all out of habit, more than curiosity. Each one was shorter than the last, until finally there were none. And in their place came silence. But instead of feeling hollow, that silence started to feel clean. Like breathing after years of stale air. Like walking barefoot on cool tiles after stepping out of fire. I rearranged the apartment. Bought myself a small plant I named Closure. It sat by the window, always turning toward the light. Every morning, I'd make coffee and sit on the balcony, his old spot, and watch the city wake up. At first, I expected him to show up again. They always do when they realize the leash is gone. But days turned into weeks, and he didn't. Maybe he finally found another savior. Maybe he was too proud. Maybe he was waiting for me to break first. He didn't realize that silence wasn't my weakness. It was my recovery. Because some people think you disappear when you stop talking. But sometimes that's when you finally start existing again. It had been a month since I last heard his voice. Long enough for my apartment to smell like lavender instead of regret. Long enough for me to start sleeping through the night without dreaming about him. Then one morning, as sunlight slid across the kitchen tiles, my phone buzzed. "Tyler, hey, can we talk just one last time?" I stared at the message. My coffee went cold before I even blinked. The silence I'd built was so peaceful that his words felt like a rock thrown into still water. I didn't reply. By evening, another message came. "You don't have to be so cold. You know I'm not a bad person." I set my phone down and smiled faintly. Of course he wasn't a bad person. He was just a selfish one, and those are often harder to spot. 3 days later, I got a call from Lena. "Bonnie, you might want to sit down for this." I laughed softly. What did he do now? Apparently, she said, lowering her voice, Melissa dumped him. She said he was manipulative, that he used his healing talk to guilt trip her. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Lena hesitated. "He told people you never supported him, that you abandoned him during his lowest point." I took a slow sip of coffee. Let him. People like Tyler don't tell lies, they tell versions of the truth that make them the hero. Later that night, curiosity got the better of me. I checked his Instagram. He'd deleted all our photos, replaced them with filtered selfies and long captions about self-growth and being misunderstood by people who couldn't handle his depth. In one post, he wrote, When you love someone too much, they mistake it for control. I actually laughed out loud. The irony was almost poetic. Scrolling through his feed, I realized something important. He hadn't changed. He'd just rebranded. He was still the same man, just with better hashtags. Meanwhile, my life had quietly begun to bloom again. I joined a pottery class, signed up for yoga. I even started painting again, something I hadn't done since before him. Each brushstroke felt like reclaiming a piece of myself he'd once drained away. Sometimes while washing paint from my hands, I'd wonder if he thought of me, if he ever missed the version of himself that I'd built for him. But then I'd remember he didn't miss me. He missed the mirror. I'd been the one that made him look better than he was. A few weeks later, Lena texted again. Tyler's been ranting online about toxic women who drain men emotionally. I smirked. Guess the title's been recycled. He also lost a few clients from his freelance work, she added. Apparently word got around about him flirting with coworkers. Karma, it seemed, had started her work quietly. Not dramatic, just steady. Little cracks forming in the mirror he used to adore himself in. One night, as I stood on my balcony with a glass of wine watching the city lights, my phone buzzed again. Tyler. I miss who we were, not the fighting just us. I know I messed up. I read it once, then I deleted it. Because when you finally made peace, you don't answer ghosts who are still haunting their own reflection. He once told me I was emotionally draining, but now he was the one pouring into a void. And for the first time in years, I realized his silence no longer frightened me. It freed me. 2 months of peace went by. No messages, no calls, no reminders that once upon a time I had built my entire life around a man who called me too much. Then one Sunday afternoon, someone knocked on my door. Softly, almost guiltily. I already knew who it was. When I opened it, there stood Tyler, wearing a hoodie unshaven. Eyes red, like he hadn't slept in days. The man who once obsessed over appearing composed now looked like a ghost wearing regret. "Can I come in?" he asked. I leaned against the doorframe. "Why?" His lips trembled. I need to explain. I sighed quietly. "You already did. I just finally listened." That answer seemed to knock the air out of him. He stared at the floor, his voice shrinking. "I made a mistake, Bonnie. Melissa, she wasn't what I thought she was. I thought I needed excitement, but what I really needed was stability. You. I just needed a backup plan," I finished for him. He looked up sharply. "That's not fair." "Neither was blaming me for your pain while I was paying to fix it," I said evenly. For a long moment, he said nothing. The silence stretched heavy and brittle. I could almost hear the excuses forming behind his eyes, the half-apologies he'd rehearsed on his way here. Then his voice cracked. "I really did love you, you know." I didn't flinch. "You loved being loved by me. That's not the same thing." He looked like he wanted to argue, but there was nothing left to fight for. He took a hesitant step closer. "Please, just give me another chance. I've changed. My therapist helped me see what I did wrong." I couldn't help it. I almost laughed. The same therapist I was paying for. That broke whatever composure he had left. His shoulders slumped and his voice turned sharp. "God, you're so cruel now. You used to care." "I did," I said softly. "That's the problem. I cared enough for both of us." He stared at me jaw tight. "You're different." "I'm calm," I said. "You mistook that for cold." For a moment he just stood there, eyes darting around the apartment. My plants, my paintings, the quiet light through the curtains. All the things that had nothing to do with him. Finally he whispered, "So that's it. After everything you're just done." I nodded. "You told me once that love shouldn't feel like an obligation. You were right. I'm just taking your advice." He blinked speechless. I opened the door wider, not for him to enter, but for him to leave. "You should go, Tyler." He hesitated. "I don't have anywhere to be." "That's not my problem anymore." He looked at me like I'd spoken a language he couldn't understand. The same man who once held my tears in his hands now stood there, unable to even look me in the eye. He lingered for another second, waiting for softness that wasn't coming. Then he turned, walked out into the hallway, and disappeared down the stairs. When I closed the door, the quiet returned, instantly. Gentle, unbothered, familiar. I stood there for a long time, listening to the silence that used to feel lonely, but now felt like freedom. For the first time, I didn't replay what I could have said differently. I didn't ache for closure or justice or revenge. He'd come seeking redemption, but what he really wanted was permission to keep his conscience clean. I wasn't giving him that. Later that night, I lit a candle on the kitchen counter, the same spot where his old coffee mug used to sit. The flame flickered softly steady and unafraid. It hit me. Then, closure isn't always about forgiveness. Sometimes it's just about letting the door close and not opening it again, no matter how gently they knock. 3 months passed. By then, Tyler's name had turned into nothing more than background noise like an old song you don't hate but can't bear to replay. Life had rhythm again. Mornings began with coffee and sunlight, not apologies and tension. I'd gotten a promotion at work, started teaching weekend art classes, and met people who didn't need saving to feel seen. Peace was strange at first. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, almost shy, like something fragile learning to trust me again. One Friday evening, Lena called. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "Tyler's been showing up at my yoga studio." I smiled. He's meditating now, crying mostly. Apparently, Melissa cheated on him with one of his coworkers. I didn't even react. Of course she did. Lena sighed. "He's been telling everyone that you broke him first, and that's why he can't trust anyone." That made me laugh, not out of cruelty, but out of recognition. Tyler hadn't changed. He'd just found a new audience for the same story. "He can tell it however he wants," I said. "I'm no longer a character in it." A week later, I got an invitation to a mutual friend's engagement party, Kevin's. Lena called again, hesitant. "Just so you know, Tyler's going too." I paused for a moment, then smiled. Good. I'm not the one who should be hiding. The party was on a rooftop downtown. Warm lights, music, laughter. When I arrived, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: ease. No eyes on me, no whispers, no tension. Just belonging. Halfway through the night, I saw him, Tyler. He stood near the bar, wearing a white shirt, trying too hard to look unbothered. When his eyes met mine, he froze for a moment, then forced a smile and walked over. "Wow," he said softly. "You look good." "Thanks," I replied calmly. He glanced around, noticing people watching. "Can we talk somewhere private?" I gestured to the balcony. "Sure." Outside, the city glowed beneath us. He leaned against the railing, trying to find his composure. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me again," he began, voice trembling. "But I've been doing a lot of work on myself. Therapy, reflection. I realize now how badly I treated you." I nodded. "Okay." He blinked, taken aback. "That's it, just okay. What else do you want me to say?" I just thought, maybe we could start over, even as friends. I don't expect everything to go back to how it was, but maybe someday. "Someday isn't coming," I said gently. "I'm glad you're working on yourself, but that doesn't mean I owe you a place in my peace." His face fell. "You really mean that?" "Yes," I said, steady. "Because I finally understand something. Peace isn't something you find in another person. It's what's left when you stop letting the wrong ones take it." He stared at me, stunned. "Bonnie, I made one mistake, and you won't forgive me." "It wasn't one mistake," I said quietly. "It was years of small ones. Lies, guilt, manipulation. You just didn't notice them piling up because I kept cleaning up after them." He swallowed hard, eyes wet. "You sound so different now." "I am," I said simply. "You taught me what I'll never accept again." He whispered, "You really don't care anymore, do you?" I smiled faintly. "I wish you peace, Tyler. But no, I don't." He turned, walked back inside, trying to keep his pride intact. I stayed there on the balcony, watching the city lights shimmer below each one, a quiet promise that life goes on. Later that night, my phone buzzed with one final message from him. "You'll miss me one day. People like me don't come twice." I stared at it for a moment, then deleted the entire thread. He was right about one thing: people like him don't come twice, because once you learn to recognize them, you never let them in again. That night before bed, I lit another candle on my kitchen counter, the same spot where his note used to sit. The flame flickered softly, steady and gold, filling the room with quiet warmth. And for the first time in years, I whispered to myself, not out of anger or grief, but simple truth. Peace isn't the absence of pain. It's the reward for walking away from